The fourth question will be asked to both tickets, so I encourage you to use your rebuttal to respond to what your opponent says. The question is, this year UPUA has had its largest budget ever and started a variety of new initiatives and projects. Some of these have been popular, others have generated controversy. If you had been UPUA president this past year, what would you have done differently? David?
I think that's a great question, Sam, I appreciate it. Just quickly, Colleen, I know you mentioned my vice presidential candidate, Devin Weekland. She's a freshman, she's a member of Schreier's Honors Council as well, the Blue and White Society. And she's actually at a Schreier's Honors Council meeting right now, fulfilling her duties. And because she's working with Schreier's and has definitely a heavy course load, she has been unable necessarily to make all the different events that we have in terms of the campaign, because ultimately, her education definitely comes first, and I appreciate that fact. In terms of what I would have done differently as president, I've had a chance to meet with President Kieran's Gavin a couple times, and he definitely is a knowledgeable individual, and like I said, he's definitely brought, he along with the other elected officials have brought UPUA from where it was a few years ago without a budget, just starting up again after the disbanding of USG, so I definitely appreciate their work. In terms of what I would have done differently, I think there would have been accountability. I think there would have been fiscal responsibility. You look in terms of President Kieran's releasing a report from the meeting into February 1st in terms of holding people. He says they may warrant sanctions, and then the next day, or the next report, February 15th, President Kieran talks about how there will be corrective action towards the issue of the downtown office. And I think one of the things I would have done differently in terms of the budget is honestly, I see the downtown, I see issues like the spring concert as pork spending. What could you do with $45,000? We could pay full tuition for an out-of-state student for a year, maybe a couple students as well. You could send out letters to your congressman. We could build the entire TRL. That's our tenant review of landlord system. We could pay for the entire development cost with that $45,000. In terms of accountability and fiscal responsibility, they talked about accountability with the downtown center that it says here, Government Affairs Chairman Colleen Smith helped to head up, and it didn't seem that there was accountability. It said the report said that the main issue was a lack of initial planning, and I appreciate that there was a report that said there's a lack of initial planning, but ultimately this isn't our money, it's the students' money, and I think there's a grand disconnect between the current elected officials sometimes and how they spend the money, because it's not actually, they don't see that as their money, but you know what, that money came from someone. That someone is a student, and we need to be held responsible for how we're spending the money.
I think both my opponent and I share in the same regards to we definitely would like to see stronger efforts towards financial stewardship. But to hit on the question, in terms of the Spring Festival, I would like to team up with organizations such as SOMA and organizations who have different gifts and talents in terms of the arts who can help us out with that. That way everybody's engaged, that way nothing is untransparent, that way everybody's involved. Also, as a committee chair, I feel as though that having a discretionary was a big thing that we accomplished this year. I would like to increase that discretionary because I feel as though you have future committee chairs who will be very spontaneous, who are going to be engaged. They have the ability to put their hands in different things that students on campus are engaged in.
I think that Christian and I have spent the past year, and more so a year or two, seeing what UPUA has done and seeing what we have the ability of doing. So we know what we have done and then what we can do and how we can build off of it. I think that we've had a lot of great initiatives, and I think that there's stuff that reaches to a variety of students. And that's why in Christian and I's platform is included even more things, reaching out to all new facets, because we know what the foundation is, we know how hard it came to get here, and so we know how hard we're going to have to work to get to the future.
David, you have 90 seconds.
Definitely in terms of, I want to come back to the budget, which I do have with me. And again, we talk about how the money's being spent. We talk about going to the university and asking them to open up their budget, and we want to have student audit for it. That's something that my government is talking about in terms of allowing the student, because ultimately, as with customers and as a resident of Pennsylvania, it's double my money. It's both my tuition money and it's both my tax money. So we want to go into university and say, we want to say how that money is being spent. But you can't do that if you yourself are not being fiscally responsible and being accountable for the money. Colleen talked about coming to the meetings to get a budget. Again, coming back to this issue of the ABTS, the Big Ten Conference, $4,200 is spent, $260 is conference registration. There's almost $3,500 in travel reimbursement for President Cairns for that. I would like to see line item budget and receipts for $3,500 in travel to the Big Ten Conference. I certainly want to see how that money is being spent. We can't go and ask the state to give us more money. We can't go and ask the university to be more open with its budget if we don't have a fiscally responsible and accountable government. And you talk about auditing and all these things, but ultimately everything seems to be just swept under the rug. We sit around and hold hands and say kumbaya, and we try to forget about the different mistakes that happen, and you can't do that if you're going to be accountable.